Hey there, in this video I just put together a sci-fi cartoon kind of make it up as you go diorama. It was good. I liked doing it because it was just a lot of stuff that I haven't played with before. I did do some resin, but I didn't film it because the last thing we need to see on the internet is another resin pouring video. There's 1,000,001 out there, so if you need to know how to do it, you can just look it up and you'll find a slew of them just in your face. So aside from that, I hope you do get something out of everything else I did in the video, and I hope you enjoy the tutorial. I've just marked up my XPS foam with a ruler so it's exact by just using the sides. As long as they're straight, it will come out perfect. A bit of grey acrylic paint on it that I've been using throughout the whole project, just to put down a nice sort of flat floor. I'll be dirtying this up a bit later on, so I'm not too worried about doing anything else to it besides putting just down a flat prime coat. These are little containers I used for the epoxy resin. They're very squishy plastic, so I knew I'd be able to peel them away from the resin once it had hardened. I just dropped my polymer clay objects in there and poured away. Got a bit of fluoro green marker powder, and they came out quite good. I've never done this really, but yeah, they came out okay. They look alright for this project. Bit of PVC piping, the connector pieces, just so I could kind of had a stand for these. As long as they fit, they seem to look okay. Little carpet foot stand. There's going to be lights inside this, so it'll be able to sort of illuminate through the bottom and then come up through this piece as well. Makes it look even more sciencey. I sprayed all the pieces black, but I wasn't too happy with the black, and I also changed the pieces around because that curved piece looked a bit clunky, and so I sort of rummaged through things and found this little foot off something. I don't know what it's off. And this other piece, I don't know what it's off either, but they fit. So I used them. I left that one basic black. And this one, I just had to do something else with it. It fits quite well, but just the basic black was not enough. So I put some of the grey onto this and then some chrome. I just stippled it and dabbed it here and there. I don't want to completely cover the black. I want it to look as much like metal as possible, and putting an even coat on will stop that effect from happening. With the chrome, I very lightly and unevenly just sort of dispersed it in little emissions, so I would have what is a pitted look in the piping, as you can see there. For pieces of tubing, I made this biscuit out of polymer clay, so I could roll polymer clay across it and create what looks like just sort of this tubing. I don't even know what it'd be called, but it came out looking pretty good. I just made the end sort of a trumpet shape, and then I found it's better to use the heel of your hand and then just sort of push it. It takes a little bit of practice just to get the right amount of pressure on this, but once you do that, they come out really nice and even, and they look really good. They kind of look like leeches, which was also interesting. You can see you just make like a cup on the end, and it would fit to any object you wanted to put it to if you pressed it against it. And you can manipulate the shape before you put them onto a tray to be baked in the oven. Make them all lengths and thicknesses. They really look like leeches. Here's an old lid of one of my plastic glue containers. It fits onto the end of this, so that's why I used it. And I gave it the same treatment as I did with the piping. I just gave it black and then did it into the silver. And then I put on some rust. I just start out with a brown, and I'll stipple it on in the places where it's going to look like it's started to, something would seep out, say moisture, and then it would start working its way around the bit of what is supposed to be metal. So I just sort of always do things in a V shape, even if it's what's meant to be corrugated iron. If you're not sure how to do something like this, don't follow someone like my guide. Get a picture off the internet of something real and go directly from a real source to get a better image of what you want to make. It'll look far more realistic. Once I've done the brown stippled unevenly, I'll get on to the other two colours, just building up with, it's like a red ochre, I think this one is, or something like that. You don't have to be too specific with these oranges and reds. And then I just go slightly inside the shape that I've already made, nice and lightly. You want to make sure it's a ratty old brush that sort of just dabs on the little pinpoints. It's starting to look quite good. And then just a slightly smaller brush for this one. It's like, I think, a terracotta or something like this. And it comes out quite good. You could use oranges and yellows and all sorts of things. As long as you sort of lighten and become more of an orange as you go inward. But that's my technique. There would be many more ways of doing this, and getting a real picture of something would be a really great way of going about it. When you copy someone else's work, it's like taking a photocopy of a photocopy, and it never turns out quite so good. So always make sure you get your own source if you want to get that edge of realism. A little bit of mica powder into some clear glue, just so it's got the leaky stuff for the lab leaks. Controversial. I made it to a consistency where it would adhere quite quickly, but also be runny enough just to let itself sort of pull down and run down into places and fall naturally. I placed one of these little leech heads into here so it would just sort of sit there and look like it was feasible on something that was real. And then I just made it at the right length so it would attach itself to the wall. I just put a hole in the foam with a pencil so it would glue in, and I'd be sure that it would never come away. I had to use a water-based glue to adhere the little leech heads to the epoxy resin, as apparently fuel-based glue will ruin it, so it was difficult to glue on. I didn't do it under the camera. And I have lots of bits that I don't think I'll ever use, but I'll save them for later. The sign, I just did a corrugated bit of cardboard with black spray and very roughly with the same grey as with everything else. The other side of it is just a few little plywood coasters glued together. I do it very roughly because I do want it to look rusty and old. And these bits of XPS foam, I just cut them into strips and used a little bit of dowel to pierce impressions into them. I use this stick for a marker. It's already got the pre-made holes in it, so I use almost everything I can find as a marker to save me ever having to measure things. It saves me time, and I can't measure to save my life, so it works out for me this way. And they look like nice bits of steel once you've given a good soaking in some of this. Just a black-brown acrylic wash with lots of water in it. Oh, that was messy. I should have done that over a sink. And then just dry them out, and they come out really great. Ready for another go on the grey, very roughly. No need to be neat about it. And they will get the same treatment as everything else that I made to look like rusted steel. Same as this. I've used some balsa wood and done the same with a stain, and then some decals that I printed out from the library on some A4 paper, because there's no way I'm going to paint stripes by hand. I would screw it up, so I do it this way. And a bit more balsa wood for the top. I'm not going to use foam because I want the border just to be a little bit stronger, so in case it needs to be handled, it won't be damaged. The sign too, I printed it out and just glued it down, because there's no way I'm going to write by hand either. It would look messy and amateurish, so I always print out and use decals. Plus it's an awful lot quicker. I'm going to make this dirtied up once it's thoroughly dry. And my little monkey head, I just cut him out and glued him on a bit of foam core board. And now I'm going to make it dirty so everything sort of ties together. Just this little border. You got to be real quick with this, it dries real fast on paper. So you got to go at it really, really fast. Have plenty of clean brushes and water at hand in case you're not used to doing this. And tie it into the edging so everything becomes one unified piece. And I'll glue the monkey head logo on there somewhere. And that's that done. Just these cheap little pots of fluoro paint just to do some more little pops of lights. I just use my finger to rub around the outside so it'll just give that little glow of illumination. If you look at it close up, it actually works. On camera not so much, but it's effective enough for just using my finger. I don't have tools like airbrushes or anything like that. So finger will do. That little bit of extra colour really makes the scene of the walls. These little guys are just, I ordered them online. I gave them a black spray and then painted them roughly, roughly by hand. I'm not very good with these things. But I just gave the impression of what would look like a scientist. White coat and smug expression is far enough. These little guys did wonders for the scale. Once I put them on, everything sort of shrank down and then expanded all at once visually. It was great to see. I like this little guy, he's very animated looking. He's even got a little tiny watch, which I thought was a really nice little feature. Now it's time to dirty it up a bit. Once again, it's about making shadows, tying everything together to make everything one cohesive piece of work. I did this all over the floor as well. I kind of focused on going down through the grooves of the floor, but not neatly. I didn't do it in an even pattern. I made sure that it was uneven. Make sure you do tie everything all up the object and all around the base of the object, whatever it is you're making. I did this almost everywhere. I didn't do it under the little people though, because I knew in lighting or under lighting they would be casting their own shadows, and I thought it may conflict with them, seeing as they're not a permanent fixture, as they probably would move around if they actually were real. And then the sign to help it when I glued it down, I just made 3 little arms just so I could lean it either side and down in the center of the V there, just to make sure it's really nice and strong. The glue I use is very good, but that extra bit of stability is nice. And some more of the Leaky lab goo. I love watching that run, it looks great. You see that blue light, they use blue light with this and it seems to illuminate, which is really great. Because this isn't glow in the dark, but it kind of looks like it is under a blue light. A few dabs to look like someone's been traipsing through the place and walking through it. I'm just putting it here and there. I did have quite a bit of trouble getting this to stick to the epoxy resin. I think maybe next time I would put down a very fine layer of acrylic paint, like a base coat, so it would adhere to it, as in a strip, and then I could put this onto the small strips of paint, because you can see there it's kind of it's separating and splitting away. I had to put about 3 coats of this on to make sure it looked right. That's a nonsensical thing, that even the attachment to it, but hey, it's sci-fi. This is it under a blue light, so you can see how it glows quite nicely. And that's this little project done. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did, and I hope to see you next time.